Well, today's a bit different. Today we have a review of this. I recently purchased a new scope. What we have here is a Rigol DS4014, which is the Rigol's bottom end 4-channel scope that doesn't have 10 kilopoints of sample memory. So this is their, as you can see, it's 4 channels. It's got 140 megapants of memory. Fairly large screen. It's quite hefty. So right now you're just seeing it's just displaying a triangle wave from my extraordinarily shitty signal generator, which is why there's all that jittering, because there's so much garbage on it. But anyways, so just taking a look around the scope. So you've got the front panel, which I'll go over in depth later. On the rear you've got trigger out, which is also used for cal, 10 megahertz input output, which is used for a reference clock, or synchronizing multiple scopes. VGA, let's see, non-auto MDIX. So it's just a 10100, I believe. USB device, USB host, Kensington lock slot, and it's actually got a hard power switch with an IEC connector. It's also got these very nice little kind of snap-out feet, so you can, in my situation, because it's up on a shelf at about head level when I'm sitting at my workbench, I tend to leave them folded up, but if you put it on your bench and it's down below, you pop these out and it leans back a little bit. But as you can see, the mechanism, I'm actually quite impressed with the mechanism on these. It's very sturdy when it's open and snaps closed nicely. One thing I'm really not too happy about is this. Warranty void if broken. It's a sticker. It's a warranty void if broken sticker. I really want to do a teardown. I'm not too sure if that's going to happen, mostly because $2,400 piece of equipment kind of broke. I'm basically broke now. But if I can, I'm going to see if I can figure out some way to kind of peel the sticker back without actually causing it to be visibly damaged, in which case I'll do a teardown. But that will have to, basically I'm going to err on the side of not taking it apart just because I really want to be sure I have warranty coverage, because Rigol there have been some firmware issues with updating the firmware on these scopes, where if you don't do it properly, the scope is basically bricked. And I have the firmware that needs to be updated through that process, so I'm a little bit uncomfortable about, possibly hosing the firmware and then just being totally stuffed. So you can see it's, previously I had an O1, one of the SDS 7012, I believe is what it was, an O1, the $450 scope. And that had a fan in it, but the fan in that is very quiet. I actually didn't notice it over the computers I have running in this room. But this has a very noticeable, you can see it's got a big 120 millimeter fan here. The fan pulls air into the case, and then it flows horizontally and is exhausted out this side of the cowling. So it's interesting. I would have kind of expected it to be blowing out, but it actually forces air into the case, and then, so presumably that way it flows along, and you can see the back of the, I would guess that the circuit board you can almost barely see in there is a switcher. I would guess that that's the power supply. It looks like it from this end. You can kind of see into the componentry a little bit. But I see a couple really big ceramics in there, which is kind of intriguing. Yeah, so I would guess, like most of the O1 scopes, you've kind of got the power supply attached to the back pane, and then just all the electronics on the on the front panel. Okay, so here we are with the close-up of the front view of the scope. You can see it's not on right now. You've got this is like a little jog dial, and then this is like a seek knob. This is the general purpose, kind of a menu-specific adjustment where you've got, and all the encoders except for this one have rotate and also click. They all have multiple functions which are accessed through pushing the encoder. Overall fit and finish is quite nice. A couple of the buttons, like if you wobble one of the membrane buttons, some of the other ones move a little bit, which means that they could probably be clamped a little better, but not at that point. I'm just minor quibbles. Overall fit and finish is nice. My only real comment is it looks like a rough. So this is obviously an exposed PC board, and it looks like the cutting for drilling the holes where the BNC's poked through is a little rough, just on the external trigger. Not really a problem. As you can see, when it's plugged in, it's got I've got a hard-on for Apple products, kind of flashing power LED, which is nice. But obviously it's going to be drawing phantom power. I'm not sure what. I haven't measured it. I probably will at some point. Boot time, As you can see, it's got lots of LEDs. It takes maybe 20 to 30 seconds to start up. You can hear it doing its internal checkout with all the relays. Give it a few seconds. And there you go, it comes up. One of the things I don't like is it comes up with this installed options menu, which tells you it's currently running a lot of the trial modes, but pushing the clear button or any of these doesn't do that. You have to hit one of the channel buttons or one of the decode buttons to clear that, whereas I would expect the clear button to make the menu go away. So responsivity wise, it's very nice. I mean, I don't have an Agilent scope to compare to, and I think from the YouTube videos I've seen on them, they're probably a little bit more immediately responsive, but it's quite nice. As you can see, what it does is it re-renders the current buffer contents before, as you're turning the knob, it re-renders the contents of the buffer, and then once you've kind of finished twiddling the knob, it then runs an acquisition and acquires at whatever the new sample rate is. So you can see up here we've got 4 gigasamples per second, and actually what it does is it appears it only takes the contents of this, it takes enough samples at whatever the sampling rate is to fill the screen. So if you want to sample on a small section and only be looking at a small section but take a lot more data, you have to manually specify that, whereas if I take a lot of data like this, like right now I'm taking 5.6 megapoints and then I stop it, I have all the data I need, or the data in there, whereas if I take samples now, I can't zoom out. So the sample rate is effectively fixed between those two acquisitions. So the sample rate now is 4 gigasamples per second, and the sample rate now is still 4 gigasamples per second, so I'm sampling at the same data rate, but it's just taking, right now it's taking 11.2 megapoints. So these scopes have the kind of the ridiculous 140 megapoints, which means that, let's see, like right now it's 4 gigasamples per second. It's got 112 megapoints for each acquisition now, and you can see the update rate. So it's actually, even at 112 megapoints of acquisition, it's quite, the acquire rate is quite good. So I can stop this and you can see I've still got all that data in there. You can also see, so the intensity grading is one of the things that's kind of, the scope was a little more money than I really could afford easily, but I really wanted a scope with intensity grading. Basically the two things I was looking for were intensity grading and 4 channels. And so you can kind of see how, so if I can kind of adjust the intensity here, and you can see how there's kind of hairy jitters on there. The triggering is a little messy right now because there's high frequency crap on here, so if I go over to, whoops, yeah, that's one thing I don't like, which is that, as you can kind of see, it doesn't update the menus very fast when you're turning the knobs. So like if I want to go down to slope, I turn the knob a little bit and it kind of pops. So you kind of got to turn the knob slowly. So you go to slope and then you push. And now you can see I don't have any trigger jitter anymore, because now it's basically kind of looking at oops. So now it's looking for a certain amount of, where is the menu option for that? Obviously, I'm kind of new. Oops. I haven't used it before. So it's sampling for it to slew through a certain window. Setting. Yeah, there's hold off. Slope. Oh yeah, there you go, of course. So you have to use the trigger knob, derp. So it's looking at it slewing through the window between these two lines. So that has an advantage of reducing, high frequency noise triggering even while your signal's slewing very fast. Right now we're on 200 millivolts per div, and I'm just using a straight up BNC cable. So I can, as you can see, this is the pot in this signal generator. This is just a horrible one of those single chip signal generators. It's all filthy. I've had it since I was like 12 or 13. Broken buttons. It's been outside. It's been in storage for a while, so the pots are all the switches are oxidized to hell. But it works. I mean, it works functionally enough for, well, except for some of the buttons. There's their idea of a sine wave, which I think is hilarious. That's like the most effective sawtooth wave ever. I have no idea what that is. Let's see edge. So that's interesting. It looks like the slew rate does not work. Anyways, there's a square wave. Probably the only thing this thing does cleanly. Anyways, you can see right now I have some measurements on. My frequency is 83.33 kilohertz. So the responsiveness to, well, I can't really show you the responsiveness to adjusting the signal generator just because this signal generator takes a long time to respond. But as you can see, the display update rate is quite good. It's quite prompt. So there's other options. I mean, obviously, one of the cool things the scope can do is it's got the Rigol's response to Agilent segmented memory, which is what this whole section here does. No, it doesn't work. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can say, record a bunch of samples. So it just took 3,998 separate acquisitions and stored them all in memory. So basically it takes an acquisition the size of the current sample size, which in this case is 112 kilopoints, and then it acquires continuously at that sample size until it fills the memory up. So basically by adjusting the time base, you know, if I, whoops, sorry, I gotta get out of, there we go. So now we're back in normal mode. So if I go to, you know, if I turn the time base down, so we're taking 560 kilopoint samples, and then I do the same thing, it only takes 499. Because, again, it's taking you, however many it takes to fill up the memory. But the nice thing then is you can see I can go back through here and I can go and I can look at all of my samples, you know, with the jog dial. And it's actually quite nice because when you're scanning through it, you can see it actually does frequency grading on the multiple response. Or I can actually play them back, though it took them so rapidly. So if I get out of that, let's go back to so you can see right now we have a 5.6 kilopoint sample. So if I do a record, so you can see we just took 63,000 acquisitions. So then you can see I can kind of scan through those. You know, I mean, obviously this is kind of ridiculous, but this is, so it's 53,000 acquisitions at 5.6 kilopoints per sample. So you can see, you can go through them one by one. So I can see this being very useful. Like one of the contexts where I think this would be very nice is like if you're trying to record a bunch of serial data packets that have large delays between them. You could set it up so that you're properly acquiring on one trigger, you know, which you just do by adjusting the time base. And then you could then record many data packets with large intervals between them, and it would basically discard the intervals. So I think, you know, in any situation where you have a lot of things you want to record which are, you know, short duration, which are separated by large intervals, this would be an extraordinarily valuable function just because it lets you, you know, it basically makes the system re-triggerable and it just breaks the memory up into large segments of whatever your sample size is. So you can see it's currently stopped, and I can go like that, which will play them back in, you know, kind of pseudo real time like what it was acquiring. You know, so you've got the little record button, so I'm just sampling again, and you can kind of see it flashes. They've got nice illuminated buttons. So there you go, there's that whole acquisition. Channels, menus are pretty nice. You can see you get a little arrow here to tell you you've got more options there. Coupling, actually, I don't have any menu options because I was in the playback mode. But you've got, you know, coupling, DC-AC ground, bandwidth limit is 0 and 20. It's got lots of options for probes, with that 1000x to 0.01x. You can also see that in all these menu options, when there's a back key, it's kind of, that's how you go back. I really wish it showed what probe type you currently have selected here. It doesn't, but I can live with that. Right now I'm set to 1x, just because, you know, again, straight up BNC cable. So it says norm probe, and I'm pretty sure that when you use one of their smart probes, which is active and connects to the terminals on the BNC inputs, that will tell you what it is. It comes with 10 fairly decent probes. Excuse me, I just bumped the scope. So it comes with 10 of these quite nice probes. They come with little a bag of accessories, which includes, you know, a very nice hook clip. So you got a very nice clip lead, and these actually snaps on very strongly. My only complaint about the probes it comes with are they're 10x only. Then far more I do slow speed stuff where I need, you know, high analog resolution than high speed stuff where I need high time resolution, you know, so a little bit of overshoot isn't a big deal. I really, in other words, 99% of the time, well, okay, 90% of the time I'm using my probes in 1x mode because I don't need the bandwidth. So, you know, fortunately I've bought a bunch of cheapo probes out of China, you know, the Deal Extreme $12 for 100 megahertz probes that I've been surprisingly satisfied with. But what can I say? So these probes are nice because, as you can see, they've got a little spring-loaded pin here, which means that the scope auto-detects them. So if I plug this probe in, it automatically says, oh hey, you've got a 10x probe. So they're kind of, you know, obviously this is just totally stolen from Tektronix because Tektronix did this first back in the 70s. You know, actually my analog scope supports this same style of probe detect. I think they have different resistances for these two connections. I haven't actually measured it. But basically it's just a resistive detect where the probe has, there's a series of different resistors in the probe and that tells the scope what the probe is. The other thing I don't really like about these probes is they've got a ground lead, but holy crap do you have to, I mean it's incredibly, like the rubber is so encroaching on the alligator clip that it's very hard to, I mean it takes like enough force that it's hard to clip them accurately when you're squeezing so hard. They are quite nice. I mean, you can possibly, I don't know if you can make it out, but they're all Rigol branded. They're RP 3500. They've got compensation. They actually came pretty much correctly compensated, which surprised me. But you can see that there's a Rigol branding on here too. The ground clips are quite nice. They come on really nicely. And then you get a whole bunch of little snap color rings, which are actually, I keep meaning to put on there because I confuse them, because you have 4 of these and it's like which probe goes where. It comes with a little yellow protective cover that just lets the probe, the pointy thing out, but this doesn't snap on at all, so I've already lost one of them. So let me just put this back in the bag. So you can see other things, you know, with other things, auto scale is actually fairly competent, as you can see, and you actually get different options. You can say, you know, I want a number of transitions, you know, I only want one main transition, or you can say I want to look at the rising edge or the falling edge. I haven't had too many really interesting signals to feed it, but it seems to work well enough. Channel options, I've shown that. Measurements, counter. Okay, so that's nice. So that tells you basically the frequency. That's cool. Actually, I'll probably leave that on. Obviously, I haven't played with this too much. Item 3, item 4, item 5, all items delete. Okay, so that's cool. So one of the things is, if you go over here into this menu, you can see you have, focus already. So you can see you have Vmax, Vmin, VPP, Vtop, Vbase, you know, V amplitude, V average, you know, a lot of these, and then you can see you also have VRMS, overshoot, pre-shoot, area. So I'm not too sure what that is. Area is in nanovolt seconds, I think. I'm actually not entirely certain what those units are. As usual, I'm using English. Apparently this item existed. You know, so if you try and turn it on. So you can see over here, these are your items, so I can go all items delete, and that takes it away. I actually hadn't figured out that until just a moment ago. So, so display all. So you can obviously see that, you know, you can turn on, here are all of the possible measurements, and it's overlapping a little bit. So I gotta go to that knob and turn that off. Measure source, channel 1, channel 2, channel 324. So you can see a lot of this stuff is very nicely color coded. So you have yellow, blue, purple, and then darker blue, which is kind of one of the complaints I have about this. So we'll get there in a minute. But you can see, so this is all of the various math they can do on the channel. So the downside, one of the downsides of the Rigol scopes, and this is also true of the Agilent scopes, but it's not true of the Tektronix scopes, and it's really one of the few reasons the Tektronix scopes have any significant advantages, at this point, because the Tektronix scopes have such crap waveforms per second, is that the Tektronix scopes perform the measurements like these on the actual entire width of the sample data. So if you have 8 megapoints of sample data, or whatever their sample size is, it performs the measurement on the entire sample data. Whereas with the scopes like this, it only performs it on the data that it's displayed. So as you can see, here I have enough to derive the frequency and the duty cycle and all of the math. But if I zoom in, then a whole bunch of the measurements stop working because suddenly they don't have enough data to determine the period, whereas it's still, as you can see with the section of the acquired waveform we're looking at, you can see the data's there, but the measurements don't work anymore, which is just purely a function of the fact that it's only working on the screen buffer. And it's kind of 6 of 1. I don't think I'm ever in a situation where I need high enough precision, or I need the precision to, or any situation where I can't just take 2 separate measurements, say using the multiple acquisition mechanisms, and then use those to, do this measurement separately. You can also see that as you kind of zoom in, like right now it's saying that the rise time is less than 200 nanoseconds because that's the pixel width. And then you can kind of see how the precision gets better. Or you can also see how as I kind of scroll through it gets very confused. So as you can also see that, the movements, like this is the horizontal movement. I mean, most of the critical things, like when you're trying to you're trying to move the channel, they're actually quite responsive. I'm very happy with them, and most of them have, if I put this way off somewhere, you click the button and it's centered automatically. For the trigger, it's responsive enough for me in any event. You have click to center, and then you also have, with regard to triggering, you also have you have force trigger, and then you have set to 50%. And the cool thing is that set to 50% is, I think it's actually performing math on the data, because it's currently setting the trigger to negative 28.7 millivolts. So I think what it actually does is it looks at the data you have and let's run. Yeah, so it appears it actually looks at like the peak to peak of your data and uses that to determine where the 50% quote unquote is. You also have click to set to the 0 mark. In this situation, because we have an offset, so if I go like that and then I click in, you set to the 0. So you click to set to the 0, and then I force to 50%, and it drops down to negative 15.6 millivolts. It's got a lot of options. There's apparently if you have a printer, like just an inkjet printer that supports the PIC bridge protocol, it can print straight to the printer, which is kind of really silly. I guess if you like hard copy, it's beneficial, and it is kind of nice that you can plug a printer straight into it without having to use any real intervening electronics. But I don't know, it strikes me as silly. You can see over here you have nice logos for your trigger mode, auto, normal, and single. Let's go to triangle just for no good reason. And you got calibration outputs over here. It turns out the cal outputs are kind of noisy, but that's another issue. You've got horizontal scale, and you've got all your adjustments here. These are also click for center. Oh, that's how you do that. Okay. So that was actually something. Turn those off. So it appears, so you can kind of get like I was actually wondering how to get into this mode, but you can kind of see, where you are, like a waveform overview. So how is it determining so what is it determining? Okay, I see. So you set the waveform for the overall acquisition, and then go like that, and then you can. So right now we're sampling at the same sample size, but this window down here is allowing us to look around within that sample size. So that's actually very useful. Oh, I see. So there's a little icon over here that says click for zoom, and I just didn't catch it. Obviously, I'm new to the scope. For whatever, not that great of an excuse. I got it 2 days ago, and it's the weekend. I haven't been working much. So you can also see we can turn on other channels. It's 4 gigasamples per second. As soon as you turn on, you know, basically you have 1 and 3, or presumably 2 and 4. Yeah. Or, you know, you can have one of these two and one of these two on, and you get 4 gigasamples per second. You turn on any of the other channels, excuse me, and suddenly you're interleaved, your sample rate drops in half, 2 gigasamples per second. It's still plenty. This is only the 100 megahertz version of this scope. But I mean, you can kind of see. One of the complaints I have about this scope, like one of the few major complaints I have, or the biggest complaint I have, it's not major and it's not, I don't see it as being that big of a problem, is the trace colors. So we have yellow, which is nice, light blue, purple, and then dark blue. Like, that just seems kind of nonsensical. It seems like this one should be bright red or something. And with regard to coloration spacing, I mean, they're certainly distinguishable, you know, particularly when they're brighter, but if I turn the intensity down, I mean, they start to become, you know, harder to distinguish. I mean, you can especially see that when it's, the intensity grading isn't helping very much. You know, it's kind of hard to distinguish the two. I mean, I can turn the intensity up, and it helps. But it's still, I wish the trace colors were a little brighter. It's not that critical of a deal, but I mean, that's kind of the one complaint I've seen. Now, as you can obviously see, so here's your offset from the trigger, you know, at microseconds. It drops down to picoseconds, which is hilarious, 400 nanoseconds. So, on a lot of these, so you know, obviously you have scale, and then you push and you get fine adjust. So you can see right now we're, you know, 420 millivolts per div. So what happens is, like, if you push to get fine adjust, and then you push to get back to coarse adjust, and the next time you adjust it, it kind of snaps to the nearest value, which is fairly nice. One of the things I found kind of intriguing is if I turn these channels off, you can still change their voltage on the channels that are turned off, which I think is kind of strange. It also means that you get their amusing parameters over range warning, which is, you know, it's a little bit of English, you know, not critical. I understand exactly what they meant the first time I saw it. It still amused me. Default button apparently has like a default configuration, and that's kind of a default recall, which is kind of cool. I can certainly see if I put this, if I set up a whole lot of strange menu options, where I'm doing something unusual for one signal, and then I want to just look at another signal, being able to just pop back to the default with a single button is beneficial. Print button I've already talked about. You know, you measure, you have let's see, clear. You know, obviously, measure range. Oh yeah, sorry. So measure range. Oh hey. Well, yeah. So you can limit the measurements to within a section of the screen, or you can go to the screen region. So as you can see, you have cursor A, cursor B, and you can move them as a group. Measurement history. You can turn on a graph in the measurement history. Actually, let me see if I can get that working. Measure. Gotta go up. Counter. Oops, I want to go up to channel 1. Alright, measure. Measure history. Alright, so I haven't turned one of the ones on that history works for. Source channel 1. So as you can see, you can scroll through the menu options by pressing the button repeatedly or by using the multi-purpose knob. One of the nice things is that the knob doesn't loop around, so you can just, you know, if I want to go to the math, I just crank it, you know, hard, and you can just kind of snap back and forth to each end by doing that. Statistic off on difference. Well, let's turn on frequency. Oh, that's cool. Average, minimum, and maximum. That's really nice. So look at that. You get rise time. You can get parameters on the rise time. So I can, in this situation, then I can go and I can delete that, and you also get the nice demonstration of what it's doing. So you push the menu option over here, and then you get the vertical. So let's go V peak to peak, 1.75 volts, and I should be able to just fill out a triggering, you know, and I can take it into DC offset, and then rail the output amplifier. Right now it's AC coupled, so you can see that we have So presumably recover means bring that back. Yes. That's kind of cute. And then it's got like a 5 item cube, a FIFO. So that's interesting. You have a difference. Extreme. How do I reset the statistics? It looks like you have to turn them on and off to reset them. So, oh, there you go. So when you turn them on, you get a new menu item in the second page. Measure setting, delay, measure range, screen region, we've already seen that, measure history, on. So that's cool. So that's a way of, basically, it kind of a chart recorder of various parameters which you measure on the signal. And it looks like right now it's doing a once per update, and it's updating pretty slowly. I guess it slows down a little bit. I'm not entirely certain how that works. Anyways, so, you know, again, the more math you're doing on the waveform, it's probably going to slow down a little bit. So let's clear all items just to get rid of them. So one of the things I like is that, you know, all of these, they don't take up any more space on the screen. They just kind of fit into this open area. Like with the O1 scope, once you had a few numbers of measurements turned on, it would kind of push the screen into the screen area, which occasionally was obnoxious. So another thing you can also do is, you know, if you want to do a lot of math, you can in fact turn on measurements for all channels. I forgot how I did it, but you can basically fill the screen with measurements and make it utterly unusable for anything, which was kind of amusing to look at, though. Oh, that's cool. You can kind of turn your measurement set on and off. Display all off. So we also have, you know, obviously there's math. You have A plus BA minus BA, XBA divided by B, FFT. What is advanced? Oh, that's cool. Expression. Oh wow! So you can build complicated math that performs between the two channels. That's pretty impressive. You have integer, difference, log, exponent, square root, sine, cosine, tan. Channel 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like you actually have temporary storage variables. It actually looks like you have integration. You have not groups, Boolean groups, figure. So it has facilities for. It looks like it has like internal variables as well, so you can perform multiple sequential operations by storing them in variables temporarily, which is it's actually quite impressive. Logic is, oh, that's cool. So those are just Boolean functions. So you can see right now it looks like I'm not too sure how they work. Oh, there you go. So you have thresholds. So you can kind of see that in this situation we're doing A and B, and here's the threshold for channel A and the threshold for channel B. So that's fairly cool. I mean, I'm not too sure where this would be useful, but the facility is there, and they don't really significantly smuck up the... So there's an FFT with the source of channel 1. So you can see we've got 20 dB, 50 kilohertz per division, 2 megaseconds. So sorry, camera ran out over the 30-minute limit. You can see it looks like the sample rate, the effective sample rate for the FFT is 2 megasamples per second. I wonder how they're getting that. I wonder if they're just tossing out the unused samples or averaging down. Hopefully they'd be averaging, but yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. But anyways, so you can see we have window, display, split, full screen. That's cool. Scale is dB, VRMS, dB. Those are all the options. Oh, I see. So that's just... It's not very responsive in this mode, as you can probably see. I mean, I adjust something, and then it displays. You get a nice immediate display over here. Turn the measurement off. Oh wait, there you go. That's more useful. Just if you have these menus open, they can kind of start to obscure stuff, so you have to kind of turn them off. Just hit the menu key. So we can see that presumably my time base is a function of... Well, that's interesting. So that appears that what I'm doing right now is So I'm just operating on the math rather than the actual time base. So if I go out of the math menu and I go to channel 1, yeah, so it appears you can operate, you can kind of effectively scale the time base for just the FFT. So actually let me go to a square wave, and that's more what we'd expect. And then let's try the aborted sine. That's better. I mean, so it appears to be working. There's the freaky sawtooth. Sorry, camera overheated. The only problem I have with this camera I'm using is that occasionally, it's a Sony Nex 5N, and it occasionally it overheats, and if I open the LCD, it lasts a lot longer, which is kind of funny. Anyway, so we can, you have a couple windowing functions. It doesn't have a lot of windowing functions, but it's got some decent ones. I can probably, so if we go over into the display menu, I should also be able to, normal, oh yeah, sorry, it's in the acquisition menu. So I should be able to do, whoops, average, yeah. So that should kind of gradually settle down and I get a better measurement, just by doing a whole lot of rectangle window. So again, a lot of the stuff can be optimized. You can see that it's obviously not doing much aliasing here, and actually one of the options in the display menu, where was it? There was an anti-aliasing mode button, but I don't remember where it went. I think it was utility. Display. You can display as dots or vectors. Wave intensity. So the wave intensity is kind of a function of the intensity grading, and whenever you're not in any other menus, pushing the general purpose adjustment knob will take you back there because it's something you wind up using fairly often, which is nice. Here it is, it's under the acquire menu. So if I turn on anti-aliasing, yeah. So you can see that we had aliasing issues going on here with the things being, see the aliasing? And then we can turn anti-aliasing on and that solves that problem. But, or mostly solves it, it looks like there's a little bit left. But it also slows the performance down fairly dramatically. Just at least of the screen update, so I tend to leave it off. Seeing a little aliasing, I know it's aliasing. It's screen aliasing. It's not like it's showing false waveforms because of the ridiculous sample rate, so it doesn't bother me that much. See, there it is. So acquire is where all this stuff is. So you have, normally I just leave it on. It's got what they call high resolution mode, and I don't know exactly what that is. Obviously, I haven't read the manual. It's an oscilloscope. It's not a fucking rocket. Oh, I think that might be for. So one of the things I do know is that let's turn the math off. Is it still on average? Yeah. So one of the comments I do have is that it doesn't have. Well, wow, that's garbage. Let's turn on. I think a lot of that is my signal source, because if I disconnect it, it goes away. So the input noise is. I can't say to be horribly impressed. As you can see right now, the input's just floating, and we've got about 2 millivolts of noise. I don't think I have any shorting shuts here. I'll just do that. So if I short it out, it gets worse just because of being an antenna. But what I can do is I can, so even with the 50 ohm limiting on there, it's still pretty noisy. So that's all So this is genuine amp noise rather than the other stuff. One of the things you can do is if you turn on the bandwidth limit, it gets way better. So, but I bet, yeah. So I think it's probably doing some sort of averaging down of something for high resolution. I actually don't know how this works. But obviously, as you can probably tell from the flicker rate of it, the sample rate has gone way down, but then so has the, I mean, the acquisition rate is much crappier. So this might be like sampling, taking many samples and averaging down using some mechanism, but I don't know what it is. But I guess, assuming you're working on repetitive signals, it probably doesn't matter. And as you can see, you get significantly, you get quite good noise performance. Not as good as, some of the Tektronix analog scope stuff I have, but then that's frickin' state of the art still. As you can see, my triggers, let's see, forces 50%, 62 microvolts. So, well, it's 1 millivolt per div. Anyway, so that's kind of the only comment I have. Actually, let's take it. So that's back with 1 mega ohm input impedance, and it looks like we're getting, that's not 60 hertz, it's just garbage. So, okay, so there you can see that all sorts of fun jazz happening with my really shitty, this thing is AC coupled on the output. I can switch it to DC coupled, but it doesn't work very well. It just injects an offset. So you can kind of see as presumably it's drifting around, driven by whatever the leakage or the output devices are into this device. But it is interesting. I mean, it seems like, let's see, my triggering's not very good. Menu. This is a tricky. So pulse when time is greater than, what is our horizontal div? Horizontal is 10 microseconds per div. So let's it appears it's triggering on some of the high frequency crap in the waveform. So it should only be, oh no, it's in triggered mode. And then slope video triggering seems to work pretty well. That's kind of weird. So anyways, you can also see we've got RS-232 triggering on various things. I mean, setting, it looks for when start, error, data. So you can go for data. You can set the data and so forth. So presumably that's just looking for a start bit. You have I2C, start, stop, missing ACK, address, data, AND, SPI. It's got lots of data options. Presumably some of these stuff will probably turn off. It's got CAN triggering, which is pretty cool. Start a frame, end of frame, frame type, frame error. Flex ray, I have no idea what that is. Obviously it's fairly fast. It's presumably a protocol, and it's also got USB, which is really cool. It doesn't do USB decoding, but apparently you can do triggering on it, and you see you have deep. It actually uses the two pairs. It uses two channels to work properly, which I thought was kind of cool. You have start of packet, end of packet, RC suspend, exit suspend. Was that working properly on Edge? Yeah. Well, I can probably just. Oh, I see. I don't know what's going on. So I should just be able to just turn this way the hell down there. And then say I want to be on falling edge. So where is my horizontal position? So it appears there's some sort of high passing going on here. Because it's triggering on something. Or it's also possible. Oh. Well, let's stop it for a second. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of high frequency crap that appears to be kind of aperiodic. Why am I not seeing it here? Oh, that's obnoxious. Look at that. So, it's not. Oh, okay, I think I see what's going on. So high precision is an averaging down just in the displaying of the waveform. So what's going on is, as you can see, it's averaging down. It's okay. So I see what high precision does now. So high precision averages down for vertical height rather than showing the extents of the signal. So what we have right now is you can see that it looks like that there's fairly precise, but if we go back to normal, we have that. So high precision is an averaging mechanism so that when it averages down rather than just showing the extents. So I guess if you have non-correlated noise, it would probably be useful. Obviously, it's not very useful in this particular context. Obviously, also my signal generator is a flaming turd. I mean, though, of course, you know, this is actually an excellent example of intensity grading. Because, hey, look, we've got, you know, just noise everywhere, and yet you can obviously see a very clear structure in the noise. That's interesting. It actually... So, I mean, you can obviously see that there's a square wave there, which is why I wanted intensity grading. So, but we can always just single shot it, you know. That's interesting. So you get like the all the display, and then if you stop it, you still get... it just holds the current display until you adjust something, at which point it kind of goes, wait a minute. Yeah, so this is one of those single chip signal generators, and it's horribly maintained, and it's a flaming turd, and it was free. But this is an excellent example because this is the sort of shit that's really hard to trigger on. Let's see, so let's go to trigger mode. Menu, slope, type edge, pulse. There we go. So yeah, there you go. So there's... Whoops. Well, let's turn the interval up a little bit. So I mean, it's kind of right on the hairy edge, but there you can see that we're triggering properly on this hideously noisy signal, which is pretty cool, actually. So sweep mode is just a stupid way of them talking about single shot, auto, or normal, which is kind of strange because they have a dedicated hard button for these, but yet they also have a menu option. You know, what can I say? You also have these buttons up here, which are actually quite nice. You have, you know, clear display, auto scale, which actually I wonder what it'll do. Okay, it's a little confused by this signal, apparently. It also broke my triggering. That's cool. So you have auto scale. That's actually really nice. Look at that. So you auto scale, and if it fucks up, you have an undo button, which takes you back to your previous display settings, even though it takes a second or two to think. So here we have... So the width of the high period. What distinguishes these two? Let's see. Obviously, it doesn't seem like they're doing any sort of acceleration, which is kind of annoying. So let's go right into the center of our wave. So I'm not too sure. So this is saying, I always want to push the button to accept. Okay, so this is greater than or less than, that's cool. So let's single shot, and let's see. So we go over here, turn on the cursors, turn manual, set one there. Let's go to cursor B. So our delta X is 20 microseconds, so that's the problem with the triggering. So over in menu, I want our upper limit to be, let's say, 22, and our lower limit to be 18. And there we go, now we're triggering properly. Because it's looking for a period. So we don't have any trigger jitter or anything, even on such a hideously noisy signal. So obviously, it's got built-in help, which I haven't done much with. Well, here we go, trigger menu. Use page up down key. Where is the page up down key? You know, obviously the documentation is kind of... Oh, that's hilarious. Wave Funder. Hello, typos. So this is... Actually, oh, hello. That's great. So look at that. So when you're adjusting these parameters, you can use the multi-purpose knob, or you can use... I guess that's what that icon there means. So that means that we have precise, and then you have large, you know, basically large adjustment range. That's cool. Okay, so that they are using this, which is very nice. So I am happy. That is impressive. So I mean, I wonder if so the cursors are not with that. So one of the things I was kind of expecting is that okay, so yeah, we can. So it has auto cursors, which obviously have a kind of low update rate, but so can I set the cursors? Cursor mode auto. Okay, that's cool. So it looks like if I go into my menu and I say, let's set my period. Okay, this is... So there you go. So it sets my cursors automatically to my period. Except for the fact that it's a little bit bothered by this horde. Obviously, my this is not the best test signal. Let's give us a bunch more amplitude. So there you go, and then it seems like over here you can say I want my measurement parameters to be my period or my frequency. So when your signal's sane, it's usable. That's quite cool. So that's actually, I was looking for that, now I found it. So yeah, and then we could, you know, go in here and we could say let's take a bunch of samples. And it just took 999 samples because it's 280 kilopoints. You can see we can scroll through all of the data it's taken, though they all look about the same. You can dump out of that by hitting stop. You know, storage, you can save traces, waveforms, pictures, CSV, or the setup, which is actually quite nice. So you can store your configuration. So presumably, so forth. And you can save to the local disk, which I actually don't know how much internal storage it has, or you can plug a thumb drive in. Another nice thing about these scopes is they implement a standard web interface. So there's some nice third-party open source tools that do a lot of really cool stuff with them over the network. You can load disk manager, local disk, local setup, local ref. It looks like it's got a lot of probably demos. And the one thing I kind of don't like is the clicking, is that occasionally when you click it actually changes. You can sort by file type. So you can see the little, okay, it's got the little, the circle and then the arrow in the middle, and that means basically rotate and then click. Record mode, I don't really know what some of this stuff does. So actually, oh, I see. So that's cool. So look at what I just did is, so now it's saying we're operating. So the record mode replies to this mechanism, and what I just did is I just added some interval between the records. Apparently the smallest gap it can have is 100 nanoseconds. But right now I just turned it up to 56 milliseconds, so it records for a lot longer. So yeah, that's quite neat. Yeah, so on the whole, I have to say I'm quite satisfied with it so far. It seems to be a very, very nice scope. It's significantly nicer than some of the other Chinese scopes I've seen. You know, again, one of the things I really like is the screen. The screen is 800 by 480. The 01 scope I had was 640 by 480, just plain old VGA. This is WVGA. Really, I mean, the Rigol scopes have interested me for quite a while, but just 320 by 240, just why? I mean, it seems like such, you know, not a very good place to cut corners, and it utterly tanks the kind of the user interface. It makes it, you know, I mean, you have, you know, even, I mean, that's like, with this sort of thing, you have 480 vertical pixels, so with an 8-bit ADC, you're slightly oversampling, but with, you know, with the 320 by 240, it's like the best ADC, you know, I guess they can use a 6-bit ADC or an ADC, they can have a really shitty input stage and it'll still look decent on the screen, but it just, you know, I mean, putting the bigger screens in here, especially for this, which is a $2,400 instrument, you know, I mean, you know, some of the 4-channel Rigol scopes, you know, even just the bottom line 4-channel Rigol scopes are like $800 or $900, and with a 320 by 240 screen, just, I don't even understand why they do that. So you can see here we've got, you know, 3 different signals. I'm using signal generator, the built-in calibrator, and the calibration output on my analog scope to just give me 3 different waveforms, because one of the things I really need to purchase, and is the next thing on my list, and I don't know when I'm going to go do that for my home lab, is a good signal generator, but I'm currently, money, I don't have any. I kind of had a hellish month at work, but I made a decent amount of money. It's one of the upsides of working, you know, being self-employed, is that if you have a lot of work available, you can make more money, but I'm just trashed right now. Anyways, so there you go. There's kind of a brief overview of a lot of the aspects of these scopes. Kind of one of the things I think is most useful when you're learning about these is just, you know, kind of seeing how they operate, you know, getting a feel for the responsivity of the scope, you know, because those are the things that are really critical in making the user, you know, determining whether it's, you know, enjoyable to use or really, you know, like the scopes where, like some of the really cheap ones where you kind of turn a knob and then, you know, half a second later the screen responds. It becomes a situation where if you want to do like a precise, you know, vertical adjustment, it's very much kind of like you wind up spending a lot of time kind of turning the knob and waiting for it to do something. I mean, this obviously you can kind of see it after you know, when you're moving it, it kind of holds the screen, and then once you delay for a second, it apparently thinks for a little while and then it resamples, which is, it's acceptable. It's not ideal. I'd love to get an Agilent scope to play with, just because they seem to be kind of the market standard right now. But an Agilent scope that's, you know, a competitive Agilent scope for this was about $3,500. You know, I was looking at some of the stuff on eBay. You know, the Agilent used stuff seems to be pretty good deals, but, you know, I really want like an Agilent DSOX or an MSOX. I don't really need an MSOX because I have separate logic analyzers and time correlated them. There's not a lot of situations where I need to time correlate analog signals and, you know, many digital signals, so I can live with just 4 channels. But they were much more expensive. I mean, Agilent has, you know, the nice used oscilloscope stuff on eBay. You know, there's actually a division of Agilent that refurbishes and sells their scopes on eBay, which has amused me. But they're all, you know, Agilent DSO, not the DSOX, which means you have much lower waveforms per second. And, you know, the one issue is, you know, they have the serial decode. You know, you have all the decode options, which I don't really expect to need that much. You know, and also I could spend another $2,000 just getting them all turned on. What I'd like to do, you know, and of course I'm making no promises here because I don't really know that much about reverse engineering assembly, is see if I can get a firmware image and poke around, because the way the codes are enabled is you actually put in a serial key. So you email them and they apparently do some math on your, they feed your serial number through a function, and that returns a key, which you then feed into your scope, and it turns the modules on. Right now it has the trial mode, which comes with 1800 minutes. You know, there's also some tricks like on the EEV blog forums where they're discussing, you know, interesting tricks you can do to reset the trial timers, which is another approach to do. I'm kind of almost of the opinion that if I don't start using them, I won't be sad when they go. But you know, on the whole, so far I've been quite happy with it. I haven't really had any significant projects to work on because I bought it coming off of the last big work project, so I haven't really had you know, a situation where I've needed to use it yet. But yeah, stuff like that. Anyways, you know, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments or anything like that, and I can probably fidget with it and see what you say. One nice thing it does come with is where did I put it? This is weird. Not there. So it comes with a fancy cover plate that snaps onto the front, which was quite nice. Anyways, there you go.